The text message arrived on Beverly Shakespeare's phone at 11:47 p.m. on a cold December night, 7 months after her son had disappeared. The sender claimed to be Abraham Shakespeare, the missing lottery winner who hadn't been seen since April. The message was simple. "I'm fine. Just needed to get away from everything. Please stop looking for me." But the message contained fatal flaws. Abraham couldn't read or write. He had a distinctive speaking pattern that was impossible to replicate in text. And most damningly, when Beverly called the number back, the voice on the other end wasn't her son's. The call was traced to a shopping mall parking lot in Lakeland, Florida, where detectives witnessed Doris D.D. Moore hand a wad of cash to Gregory Smith, the same man who had been paid to make the call to Abraham's mother. Moore had been the last person to see Abraham alive, his self-proclaimed financial advisor, and the woman who now lived in his million-dollar mansion. Detective Maria Rodriguez had investigated missing person cases for 12 years, but she'd never encountered anything like this. A lottery winner who had won $30 million in 2006 was now missing, his fortune systematically drained by someone claiming to protect him from fortune seekers. The investigation would reveal not just a missing person, but a systematic exploitation of a vulnerable man who had trusted the wrong person with his newfound wealth. Text messages would turn out to be fake, confessions would be extracted through undercover operations, and a backyard would reveal the final resting place of a man whose luck had run out. The lottery winner who vanished overnight had left behind something more valuable than money, a digital trail that would expose his killer and reveal how a $30 million jackpot could become a death sentence. Plant City, Florida, was known for its strawberry fields and orange groves, a rural community where everyone knew everyone, and wealth was measured in acres rather than dollars. Abraham Shakespeare, 41, fit this landscape perfectly, a truck driver's assistant who had spent his life working hard for modest pay, supporting his family through backbreaking labor. The local convenience store on Highway 92 was a hub of activity where locals gathered for coffee, lottery tickets, and community news. On November 15, 2006, Abraham stopped there with his friend Michael Ford, handing him a few dollars to buy 2 lottery tickets. That night, their lives changed forever. Abraham won $31 million, choosing a lump sum payout of $16.9 million after taxes. His initial generosity was boundless. He purchased homes for his cousins, helped his friend Greg Smith pay off an $87,000 business loan, and gave money to anyone who asked. He embodied the American dream of rags-to-riches transformation. But Plant City's tight-knit community was about to demonstrate a darker side of human nature. The money that should have been a blessing became a curse as distant relatives appeared with hard luck stories, old friends resurfaced with investment opportunities, and strangers claimed long-forgotten debts. Doris D.D. Moore entered this world of sudden wealth and predatory relationships through a mutual friend. She claimed she wanted to write a book about Abraham's story, but her real intentions would prove far more sinister. The stage was set for a disappearance that would shock the nation and expose how a lottery win could become a death sentence. The systematic exploitation of Abraham Shakespeare began subtly but accelerated rapidly. By early 2007, Moore had established herself as Abraham's unofficial financial advisor, managing his affairs with an authority that concerned his family but seemed to comfort Abraham himself. Moore's first move was to isolate Abraham from his support network. She suggested he stay home to avoid fortune seekers who might try to exploit his wealth. This advice, seemingly protective, gradually cut him off from friends and family while increasing his dependence on Moore for all financial transactions. Her company, American Medical Professionals, purchased Abraham's million-dollar home on January 9, 2009, for $655,000. However, property records showed no evidence that Moore actually paid the purchase price. Instead, she claimed to have taken over 5 mortgages totaling approximately $370,000, creating a complex financial web that put his money under her control. Abraham's family grew increasingly concerned as contact with him became sporadic and eventually ceased. What had begun as weekly phone calls became monthly, then stopped altogether. When they questioned Moore about his whereabouts, she provided reassuring but vague explanations. He needed space. He was tired of people asking for money. He was traveling to clear his head. The cover-up operation became more sophisticated in late 2009. Moore began sending text messages from Abraham's phone, despite the fact that Abraham was functionally illiterate and struggled with basic written communication. She hired Gregory Smith, a local barber who owed Abraham money, to impersonate him in phone calls to his mother. The deception unraveled when Abraham's mother received a suspicious phone call on December 5, 2009. The caller claimed to be Abraham, but his voice was wrong, his speech pattern didn't match, and he used phrases Abraham would never say. Detectives traced the call and found it had been made by Gregory Smith, who had been paid $5,000 by Moore to make the call and then deliver the money back to her in a mall parking lot. The investigation formalized when Cedric Edom, Abraham's cousin, reported him missing after 7 months of no contact and increasingly suspicious explanations from Moore. Detective Rodriguez was assigned to the case and immediately identified irregularities in Moore's explanations and behavior. Moore's story became more elaborate as questions intensified. She claimed Abraham had wanted to disappear to escape financial pressures, child support obligations, and the burden of constant requests for money. She produced a video showing Abraham complaining about people asking for financial help, which she claimed proved his desire to vanish. However, forensic analysis of Abraham's phone records revealed that after his disappearance, the only communications from his device were sent to Moore's phone. Location data showed that Moore's cell phone pinged from the same cellular towers as Abraham's, suggesting she had been in possession of his phone since his disappearance. The cover-up began to collapse when Moore attempted to hire someone to take responsibility for Abraham's death. She approached an undercover officer posing as a criminal willing to confess, offering $50,000 and providing details about where Abraham's body was buried. She also handed over the murder weapon, a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver, and explained that she had obtained it from the unknown person who shot and killed Abraham. On January 25, 2010, investigators found Abraham's body exactly where Moore had indicated, buried under 9 feet of dirt and a concrete slab in the backyard of a home Moore had purchased in Plant City. Her ex-husband testified that she had had him use a machine to dig the hole and fill it in after sundown on the night of the murder, claiming he hadn't known there was a body inside. The lottery winner who vanished overnight had left behind something more valuable than money, a trail of digital evidence, fake communications, and financial transactions that would expose his killer and reveal how a $30 million jackpot had become a death sentence. Detective Rodriguez approached the investigation systematically, understanding that missing person cases involving substantial wealth required careful attention to financial records, communication patterns, and behavioral evidence. The 7-month delay in reporting Abraham's disappearance complicated the investigation, but also provided a wealth of digital evidence to analyze. The financial investigation began with Abraham's bank accounts and assets. Records showed that while he had won $16.9 million in 2006, his accounts had been systematically drained over the following 3 years. Large withdrawals, property transfers, and business dealings all pointed to Moore's increasing control over his finances. Phone records analysis revealed the sophisticated nature of the deception. After Abraham's last confirmed sighting in April 2009, his cell phone had been used to send text messages and make calls, but only to contacts associated with D.D. Moore. The phone's location data showed it pinging from the same cellular towers as Moore's device, suggesting she had been in possession of both phones simultaneously. Moore's financial activities provided crucial evidence of her criminal intent. She had used Abraham's money to purchase luxury vehicles, including a $70,000 Corvette for her boyfriend and a $30,000 truck for herself. She bought Rolex watches, diamond rings, and other expensive items, all while maintaining that Abraham had voluntarily disappeared to escape financial obligations. The investigation into the fake communications required specialized digital forensics. Text messages allegedly from Abraham contained language and sentence structures that didn't match his known communication patterns. Phone calls made in his name used a voice that family members immediately recognized as artificial, particularly given Abraham's functional illiteracy. Gregory Smith's cooperation proved invaluable to the investigation. His admission that Moore had paid him $5,000 to impersonate Abraham provided direct evidence of her attempt to mislead investigators. The subsequent wire operation, where he recorded Moore discussing the cover-up, established her knowledge of Abraham's death and her efforts to conceal it. The undercover operation was meticulously planned. Detective Rodriguez had Smith arrange another meeting with Moore, this time introducing an undercover officer as Smith's cousin, a criminal willing to take responsibility for Abraham's death in exchange for payment. The recorded conversation provided the evidence that would break the case wide open. In the recorded meeting, Moore admitted that she believed Abraham was dead and had been shot. She explained that she needed someone to claim responsibility for the killing before police discovered the truth. She provided detailed information about where Abraham's body was buried and even handed over what she claimed was the murder weapon. The physical evidence discovery was dramatic. Moore led Smith to the property in Plant City where Abraham's body had been buried. She indicated that he would need to dig 6 feet down under a concrete slab to find the remains. The precision of her directions, combined with her detailed knowledge of the burial site, provided irrefutable proof of her involvement in the crime. The excavation was carefully documented. On January 27, 2010, investigators found Abraham's remains exactly where Moore had indicated. The body was buried 9 feet underground, beneath a concrete slab that had been poured specifically to conceal the grave. Forensic analysis would later confirm that he had been shot with a .38 caliber weapon. The investigation revealed that Moore had systematically isolated Abraham from his support network while gaining control of his finances. She had created fake communications to maintain the illusion that he was still alive, and she had planned an elaborate cover-up involving false confessions and body disposal. However, the investigation also revealed Moore's crucial mistake. She had underestimated the investigative capabilities of modern law enforcement. Her plan was sophisticated but not foolproof. The digital evidence, financial transactions, and behavioral patterns she left behind provided a clear trail that led directly to her guilt. The case that began with a missing person report had evolved into a complex investigation involving financial fraud, impersonation, evidence tampering, and ultimately, murder. The key evidence had come not from physical forensics but from digital investigations and undercover operations, demonstrating how modern missing person cases could be solved through technology and systematic investigation. The investigation took an unexpected turn when forensic analysis of Abraham's remains revealed details that contradicted Moore's version of events. While she had claimed that drug dealers had killed Abraham during a robbery, the physical evidence painted a different picture of his final moments. The medical examiner determined that Abraham had been shot once in the chest with a .38 caliber revolver, but the trajectory and positioning suggested he had been shot from close range, likely during a controlled situation rather than a chaotic drug deal. The absence of defensive wounds indicated he had not been expecting violence. More significantly, the analysis of Abraham's financial situation revealed a systematic pattern of exploitation that went beyond simple theft. Moore hadn't just stolen money, she had methodically gained control of his entire financial life, isolating him from family, friends, and professional advisors while positioning herself as his sole protector. The investigation uncovered that Moore had created elaborate business structures designed to funnel Abraham's money to herself. Abraham Shakespeare LLC, the company she had formed with him, was structured to give her control of decision-making while Abraham remained nominally in charge. She had systematically drained the company accounts while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. Digital forensics revealed the extent of Moore's deception. Between Abraham's disappearance in April 2009 and the discovery of his body in January 2010, his phone had sent dozens of text messages and made numerous calls, all orchestrated by Moore to maintain the illusion that he was still alive. She had studied his communication patterns and attempted to replicate his speech patterns, though with limited success given his illiteracy. The investigation also revealed that Moore had been planning the crime for years. Her earlier arrest for insurance fraud showed a pattern of using elaborate schemes to extract money from victims. She had extensive knowledge of financial systems, property law, and evidence manipulation, all skills that she had applied to the Abraham Shakespeare case. However, the most shocking revelation came from analyzing Moore's interactions with Abraham's family. She had systematically undermined their relationship, creating conflicts and misunderstandings that would make them less likely to question her explanations for Abraham's absence. She had positioned herself as Abraham's only true friend while portraying his family as greedy. Fortune seekers, the investigation uncovered evidence that Moore had been researching methods for concealing homicides, including studying how to dispose of bodies, how to create false alibis, and how to manipulate digital evidence. Her computer contained searches for information about body decomposition, concrete pouring techniques, and ways to avoid leaving forensic evidence. The psychological profile that emerged suggested Moore was not simply a greedy opportunist, but a systematic predator who understood how to manipulate vulnerable people for financial gain. Abraham's sudden wealth had made him a target, but his trusting nature and lack of sophistication had made him an ideal victim. The investigation also revealed that Moore had been preparing for Abraham's eventual discovery. She had established alternative explanations for his absence, created false evidence of his continued existence, and planned an escape route that would allow her to disappear if the investigation became too intense. But the most compelling evidence came from Moore's own words during the undercover operations. When she had discussed hiring someone to take responsibility for the crime, she had provided details that only the killer would know: the exact location of the body, the method of death, the timeline of the crime, and the evidence that needed to be concealed. The case had evolved from a missing person investigation into a complex prosecution involving financial fraud, identity theft, evidence tampering, and first-degree murder. The digital evidence, financial records, and recorded conversations provided a comprehensive case that left little doubt about Moore's guilt. The investigation that began with a mother's intuition about a fake phone call had exposed a systematic predator who had used trust, deception, and technology to steal a fortune and take a life. The lottery winner who vanished overnight had left behind something more valuable than money, a trail of evidence that would ensure his killer faced justice. The trial of Doris D.D. Moore began in December 2012, nearly 3 years after Abraham Shakespeare's body was discovered. The prosecution faced a complex challenge, proving first-degree murder based primarily on circumstantial evidence, with the victim's extensive cooperation with his killer complicating the narrative of intent. Assistant State Attorney Jay Pruner presented the prosecution's theory. Moore had systematically isolated Shakespeare, gained control of his finances, murdered him to cover her crimes, and then maintained an elaborate deception to conceal his death. The evidence included financial records, digital communications, undercover recordings, and Moore's own statements to investigators. The prosecution's case was built methodically. They began with Abraham's lottery win and rapid financial decline, establishing the motive for Moore's criminal activity. They then demonstrated how Moore had gained increasing control over Abraham's life while isolating him from family and friends. The financial evidence showed systematic embezzlement totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. The most compelling evidence came from the undercover operations. Recordings of Moore discussing the cover-up, admitting knowledge of Abraham's death, and providing specific details about the burial location were played for the jury. These recordings established her knowledge of the crime and her efforts to conceal it. Digital forensics experts explained how Moore had created the illusion that Abraham was still alive after his death. The analysis of text messages, phone calls, and location data showed a systematic pattern of deception designed to mislead investigators and family members. The prosecution also presented evidence of Moore's criminal history and pattern of behavior. Her previous arrest for insurance fraud demonstrated a willingness to use complex schemes to steal money. Her knowledge of financial systems, property law, and evidence manipulation showed the sophistication necessary to execute the crimes. Moore's defense team, led by prominent defense attorney Glenn B. Lansky, presented an aggressive strategy. They didn't deny that Moore had stolen money or misled investigators, but they argued she wasn't responsible for Abraham's death. They suggested that unknown drug dealers had killed Abraham during a robbery, and Moore had been forced to cover up the crime. The defense attempted to undermine the prosecution's interpretation of the evidence. They argued that the financial transactions were legitimate business dealings, that Moore had been genuinely trying to help Abraham, and that her statements during the undercover operations had been taken out of context or misunderstood. Expert witnesses for the defense challenged the prosecution's interpretation of digital evidence, suggesting that the text messages and phone calls could have been generated by Abraham himself or by other parties with access to his phone. They questioned the reliability of location data and the interpretation of financial records. The defense's most significant challenge was explaining Moore's confession during the undercover operation. They argued she had been under emotional stress, was being manipulated by investigators, and had been trying to protect herself rather than admit to murder. They suggested her statements had been coerced rather than voluntary. However, the prosecution presented compelling rebuttal evidence. Moore's own family members testified about her manipulative behavior and pattern of lying about financial matters. Associates described her systematic efforts to control Abraham's life and finances. Her ex-husband testified about being forced to dig the grave without knowing what it contained. The medical examiner's testimony was crucial. Dr. Vera Volnick explained how Abraham had died from a single gunshot wound to the chest, the positioning of the body suggesting he had been shot at close range in a controlled situation. The absence of defensive wounds indicated he had not been expecting the violence. The prosecution also presented evidence of Moore's attempts to obstruct justice, her efforts to hire someone to confess to the crime, her payments to witnesses to provide false testimony, and her manipulation of evidence demonstrated consciousness of guilt beyond the murder itself. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts. The speed of the deliberation suggested that the prosecution's evidence had been compelling and that the defense's alternative theories had not created reasonable doubt about Moore's guilt. The sentencing phase was emotional. Abraham's family members described the impact of his loss on their lives and their anger at being deceived about his fate for months. The judge noted that Moore had shown no remorse for her actions and had continued to manipulate the legal process even after her arrest. Moore was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25-year minimum sentence for possessing a firearm during a violent felony. The consecutive sentences ensured she would die in prison, with no possibility of release regardless of future legal developments. The case established important precedents for prosecuting financial crimes that escalate to homicide, particularly those involving systematic exploitation of vulnerable individuals. It demonstrated how modern investigation techniques, including undercover operations and digital forensics, could solve complex cases involving sophisticated cover-ups. The Abraham Shakespeare case concluded with Doris Moore's conviction in 2012, but its implications continue influencing how lottery organizations and law enforcement agencies approach investigations involving missing winners. The case highlighted vulnerabilities in lottery winner protection programs and demonstrated the need for better financial oversight of sudden wealth recipients. The investigation demonstrated how digital forensics could solve complex missing person cases. The analysis of text messages, phone calls, and financial transactions provided the evidence necessary to prove Moore's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The use of undercover operations and recorded confessions showed how modern investigation techniques could expose sophisticated criminal conspiracies. The case also revealed the dark side of lottery winnings. Abraham's $30 million jackpot should have been a blessing, but it became a death sentence when he fell into the hands of a predator who understood how to manipulate vulnerable people for financial gain. The systematic way Moore isolated him from his support network while gaining control of his finances demonstrated how quickly newfound wealth can be squandered or stolen, but the most important lesson was about the resilience of truth. Despite Moore's elaborate cover-up, her sophisticated attempts to maintain the illusion that Abraham was alive, and her efforts to hire others to take responsibility for her crimes, the evidence ultimately revealed the truth. The text messages, phone calls, and financial records she created to deceive became the evidence that convicted her. The documentary closes with Detective Rodriguez's final reflection. Technology creates opportunities for criminals to deceive, but it also creates opportunities for investigators to discover the truth. Abraham's case shows that even the most sophisticated cover-ups leave evidence behind. The digital trail that was meant to deceive became the roadmap that led to justice. The case serves as a reminder that sudden wealth can attract predators, but systematic exploitation leaves evidence that can lead to justice, even if it takes months to uncover the truth.